George. I swear you had her. Come on with me. He led George into the entrance of the trail and up toward the highway. Curly and Carlson looked after them, and Carlson said, "Now what the hell you suppose is eating them two guys?" And thus concludes Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck. You guys again? Again? I thought the season was over after 13 weeks. But I guess not. Alright. Get real close there for a second. Alright, let's do this, I guess. Welcome, everyone, to the Tonto's Demise Week 14 recap. We are not recapping playoffs yet, because we had one more week of the regular season, and I kind of wish that we didn't, that this was the first week of, excuse me, still recovering a little bit, lingering effects of my cold, still holding on a little bit. Yeah, I kind of wish this had been the first week of the playoffs. This was quite the week, though, because we had some teams do pretty much nothing. We had someone not set their lineup, which cost them a victory, which cost someone, changed who ends up in the basement. Was Jay doing Brian a old roommate favor, or was this just a case of I give up? Hopefully it was a favor, because I believe the consensus across the league is that we don't look kindly upon people who don't set their lineups. Even if you're out of the playoffs, do the courtesy of at least setting your lineup. You would have won, Jay, if you had just put in, you didn't even have to change somebody for Henderson. If you would have put in Foreman and the Baltimore Ravens defense, you would have won this matchup. And Brian would have ended up in the basement and having to wear his own Phillip Rivers jersey at the draft next year. But you didn't. And so Gags is going to have to squeeze into that Rivers jersey next year. Other than that, pretty much all the playoff teams went over 200 points this week. Blew up. Josh went crazy. Everybody was like right in the same area, basically. 3 teams, all ending with .95. Excuse me. The Topes, 201.95. CMC, 202.95. Biscuits, 203.95. And Yinzer Jags, 204.3. So 201, 202, 203, and 204. Sorry. Hopefully that's the end of it. So anything else? Well, since the week is over, and yesterday and today, the COVID list has exploded. I think the Browns and the Rams are teams getting hit the hardest right now. But I fully expect that we're only starting to see the beginning of that. I expect it to get worse before it gets better. So here we are. It's only Tuesday. We got games on Thursday, Saturday, Sunday. I'm not optimistic that everyone is going to avoid some issues here coming up in the playoff matchups in terms of having some COVID issues, but we will have to wait and see what happens. So anyway, week 14, extra week in the regular season here, was basically a week of playoff seating shufflings. Everybody who was in was already in. clinched. Everybody who was out had no chance of making it. So, let's take a look at what happened, because most of these matchups, except one, did have an impact on the final playoff seedings. So we start with the Springfield Isotopes, defending champions, going up against CMC Music Factory. Oh, God. CMC, I'm coughing and yawning because I got home at midnight and realized, God damn it, I didn't do the recap yet. So here we are. As I've already mentioned, CMC had 202.95, and the Topes had 201.95. So CMC, already eliminated from playoff contention, shuffles things up, throws a wrench in the playoffs, throws a little grenade in there, shakes things up with that 1-point victory over the Topes. I was winning by over 100 points going into, well, I had Stafford on Monday night, and he got 50 points, basically putting me up by over 100, with Justin just having Kyler Murray, James Conner, and Matt Gay, the Rams kicker. I'm thinking there's no way that he's going to get 100 points just from those three guys. I mean, if Murray goes off for like 60, that means Connor's probably going to get maybe 20. So that's 80. Then his kicker would have to get another 20. That's not going to happen. And it happened. Not only it was the last play that the Cardinals actually completed a play. They got sacked on the final play of the game. On the final drive, as you probably are already, anyone who's paying attention is already aware, I believe they had 2 penalties back to back, and then the only play that they actually did something, of course, Kyler Murray just had to throw a pass to James Conner, and that sealed the victory here for CMC, and they got the win, or said Murray got sacked on the next play, and the game was over. Not only that, the Rams, you couldn't just recover an onside kick. You couldn't do that. First, you give up a 45-yard bomb on 4th and 10 or whatever it was, letting them get the field goal, and then you can't recover the onside kick. So now the standings are shuffled. My season might come down to the Rams said not recovering that onside kick, and Murray throwing it to Conner on that last of all the people on that last play, and Justin having both of them. That might be what, in terms of what the seeding is now, what ships me out of the playoffs after this week. Gonna be a tough one. Anyway, CMC. Murray goes for 54.25. Mike Evans, 21. Mooney, 3. Patrick, 4. Johnson, Ty Johnson, I think, 9.5. James Conner, 33.5. Seals Jones, 1.8. Hubbard, 9.3. Gay, 15 point something, I think. And the big one here, another one too. Jacksonville, couldn't you just score any points in this game? Tennessee's defense went for 51. So 105 points just from Justin's quarterback and defense was enough to get past the Topes this week. Still praying for a late stat correction. Don't think it's going to happen. Tennessee shuts out Jacksonville and got 51 points. All sorts of things that could have gone differently. For the Topes, Stafford goes for 49.5. Devontae, 34. Deontay, 15.5. Higgins, 16.5. Melvin Gordon, 26. Hilliard, plugged in him against Jacksonville. How did these they're a running team. How did all of these guys had no rushing yards. Hilliard, only 1.3. If I had played Hasty, I would have won this matchup, but I wasn't going to do that. Dalton Schultz, only 1.4. That hurts too. Ayuk in the flex, 18.5. Picked up a kicker for this week instead of Folk. Played Hopkins. He got about 12. Actually, it's like 13.5. He did pretty good. And then the Packers defense, I believe, was Yahoo says 17. I think it was 26. So Justin basically gets bailed out on Monday night, said by Murray. Said Tennessee defense scored over 50. And Connor, basically that was your whole team there. I see Connor's got a question mark next to him now. A Q, I should say. I heard he got hurt on like the very last play of the game. On that catch that he made there. So we'll see. That could be a boost for me with hopefully Chase Edmonds coming back here this week. But yeah, Justin bows out of the regular season. Said throwing a little grenade in the playoffs, in our playoff seedings here. Knocking the Topes from what would have been the 3 seed down to, and playing Possum Magic this week, so down to the 5 seed and having to play Disco this week coming up. All right, let's do the matchup that didn't matter. Hillbillies versus Saquon. Hillbillies wins 149.9 to 129.85. Again, this matchup should have gone the other way, but Saquon, it ain't so. Didn't set his lineup, left Bolden in instead of Deontay. Could have put Deontay Foreman in there. Left the Colts defense in there, who was on bye, instead of putting Baltimore Ravens defense in there. And with Christian Kirk on Monday night, you would have gotten enough points to win this matchup. Just barely, but you would have won, I do believe. But anyway, Hillbillies gets the victory. Burrow goes for 53.5. Beasley, 15.5. Tyler Boyd, 10.5. Debo, 13. Najee, 25.5. I don't even know this guy's first name. Jermar Jefferson from the Detroit Lions. You picked him up and wasted your time because he got you 0. Moreau, because you don't have Waller, he got you 4.5. Russell Gage, 10.5. Joseph, the Vikings kicker, gets you about 11. And the Steelers defense, I believe, must have gotten you what Yahoo says, 6. That must have been correct. For Saquon, Dak only gets 32. Emmanuel Sanders, 3.5. Hunter Renfrow, 28.7. And Tyler Lockett, 27.2. Henderson, started him. He was out with COVID. Started Bolden, the Patriots running back. They were out on bye. Kyle Pitts, 11. Christian Kirk, 11.5. Tucker, your kicker, goes for about 16 or so. Colts defense on bye, so 0. You lost by 20. Foreman would have gotten you 14.2. And I believe Baltimore's defense might have been, Yahoo says 9. I think it might have been 12. So 12 and 14, 26. You would have won this matchup, Jay, and Brian would have finished where he deserved. He should have been last place. Only not saying that as like not taking a shot at you, Brian. It's simply because Jay should have won this matchup and you should have ended up in last place. Anyway, what else we got? We'll run through the other stuff here. Shawshank Athletics trying to jump from the 6th seed all the way up to 3. Basically didn't matter. Either one. Those are the 2 seeds that play each other in the first week of the playoffs. And he almost got there. He didn't quite make it. But Shawshank nearly, and I don't think this has ever happened before or come this close to happening before, Shawshank nearly triples up Gags to Riches 249.35 to 85.5. I believe Josh just needed about 6 or 7 more points to have tripled up Gags in this matchup. For Shawshank, Did you blow your load a week too early, perhaps? We'll have to wait and see here, Josh. Just disgusting scores up and down your lineup. Herbert, 50.5. Chase, 25.5. Cooper Kupp, 31.5. Jefferson, 20.5. Edwards-Helaire, 19. Dalvin, just over 40. Mark Andrews, 28.5. Jarvis Landry, 15. Carlson, your kicker, I think 1. And 1 point something maybe. And Seattle's defense gets you about 17, I'm going to say, based on the little point jump there. Maybe, about 17. So yeah, almost 250 points for Shawshank this week, propelling him way ahead in terms of the overall point total for the year of everybody in the league there. Gags, only 85.5. 19 for Heineke, 11 for Gallup, 3.5 for Galladay. Mike Williams, 12. James Robinson, 0.4. Breida, 1.2. Conklin, 4. Osborne in the flex, 17.3. Butker, about 15. And then the Buffalo Bills defense. Yahoo says 2. I'm going to guess that was correct. 2. So yeah. Gags finishes a surprisingly poor season. 4-10. He ends up in 12th place, and he will be having the Rivers jersey next year. At the draft, Shawshank, he said he jumps all the way up to the 3 seed, and he is going to get Possum Magic in week 14. So let's jump to this one. Possum Magic kind of reeling lately too, and he backs his way into the playoffs here, getting throttled once again by Dub C Hooligans, saving their best for last. 190.05 to 146.3 for Possum. Said kind of limping his way into the playoffs here at the 6th seed. Dub C, Carr goes for 45. Brown, 9. Patterson, 14. Amari Cooper, 16. Montgomery, 14. Jacobs, 10. Kelsey, only 5.5. Javonte Williams, 21.5. Suck Up Your Kicker goes for about 8. And then the Cowboys defense. Yahoo says 32, but we bumped you all the way up to about, I want to say 48-ish, based on the difference there. So yeah. 190 sends Dub C, moved him up to 500. He actually finishes just outside the playoff window there, the playoff door, I should say, at 7-7 in 7th place. Possum falls to 8-6. Said he's going to be the 6th seed here in the playoffs, the first round. Russell Wilson goes for just under 41. Diggs, 14.5. Traquan, 6.5. What's this guy's? Amon-Ra St. Brown, 15.5. Chubb, 9.5. Devontae Freeman, 12. Gronk, 11. Mixon, 8.8. Koo, about 12.5, 13 points. And then the Minnesota Vikings defense, Yahoo says 8. Looks like we bumped you up to about 17, I'm going to guess. Oh, maybe not, maybe like 14. Looks like, must have been 14. But yeah, not too much going on for Possum Magic this week. He's got some injury problems. You traded Scary Terry for Elijah Moore, who's now on IR. Thielen's got an ankle sprain, high ankle sprain, I believe, so he's probably iffy at best for this week coming up in the first round of the playoffs. So yeah, Tree is going to have some issues here. It said Cleveland. I think Chubb was already out with COVID, so hopefully for you, he's not going to have any issues going further there. But yeah, you're going to have some problems here putting things together. Let's see. But okay, so Dub C ends up the season 7-7, finishing on a high note in 7th place there. Possum Magic, 8-6. He going to be the 6th seed in the playoffs. First round, going up against Shawshank Athletics. Yinzer Jags was trying to get a victory and hold on to the number 1 seed, one of the first round buys. Obviously, the regular season champ gets his money back. So, Detling, you're already $50 richer now. Speaking of that, Jay, please pay your dues. Nobody gets paid until all the dues are paid, as always. So, Jay, I know you're not listening, but please pay your dues. It's already almost Christmas. But this is pretty much par for the course every single year anyway, so I am not surprised. The Yinzer Jags, man. Where did I write this down? Previously, because I knew this is going to happen, I'm going to have to check the league's record book, because previously, the largest margin of victory ever in the league previously was the week where Jimmy Huber broke the record with 200, that still stands, I should say, the 275-point performance. He won that week by 125.8. And that was in 2014. So that record has stood for 7 years. And 2 teams would have broken that this week. But I'm going to have to check and see. Let me take a look real quick, might as well while we're at it, to see. It should have been updated what the largest. Okay, so Gags to Riches, Josh, you won by 163.85 points. So easily crushing the old record. Said it stood for 7 years. So congratulations to Josh for breaking that record and defeating Gags by 164 points. New league record. Anyway, Yinzer Jags gave it the old college try as well. He would have broken the record if Josh had not done it, because Yinzer Jags defeats Ed Lager 204.3 to 75.05. So that is what, 129-point difference there. So Detling, you would have broken that record, except Josh took it right up from underneath you. For Yinzer Jags, Josh Allen goes for almost 80, basically making up pretty much all your points came from Kittle, who had 37, and Allen, who had 80. McLaurin goes for 0. He got concussed, so you couldn't have asked for a better week to get a bye here, Detling, because you need it. Josh Allen got 80 points, but he was in a walking boot after the game, hurt his ankle. McLaurin got 0. He got concussed. Hopkins, 10.5. He's got a Q by his name again. Let's see. Hopkins is undergoing an MRI too, just like James Conner. DJ Moore got 14.5. He's got a Q next to his name. Eckler, 16.5. 16.5. Not 60. He's got a Q next to his name with also an ankle injury. Jeff Wilson, 5.5. Kittle said 37. Sony Michel, 8. McManus, about 10.5. And then the Denver defense, Yahoo says 14. We must have bumped you up to about 20 or 23 maybe for them. And just got you over, despite that 0, said Allen, 80. So 117 points just from almost 120 just from Allen and Kittle. So you basically just needed the rest of your guys to kind of show up to get you over 200 there. And you did with 204.3. Ed Lager with, I believe, what is the lowest score of the year for anybody. Mostly thanks to Lamar Jackson getting hurt fairly early in that game and only getting you 5.35. Cooks 18, Allen Robinson 3.5, Rondell Moore 4.5, Antonio Gibson 4, Saquon 18.5. Higbee was out with COVID, although I believe it was a negative. They think it was a false positive, is what ended up happening with him. But he was not able to return 2 negative tests fast enough, I think, is what happened. So he had to sit out last night, and you didn't pick up anybody. This matchup was over to begin with, not even close. So, obviously. So, really, no big issues there with you not doing anything about Higbee. Last game of the regular season, anyway. Callaway, 5.5. T-Bass, kick his ass, T-Bass. Gets you about 7 or 8. You had to play the Bengals defense this week, and they went for about, Yahoo says 8. That must have been correct, because we didn't really have to update your score at all. So yeah, Ed Logger finishes the season. He's ends up in 11th place, going out on a sour note, perhaps, with the lowest score, I believe, of the year at 75. And Yinzer Jags, with that victory, stays in first place, gets the first round bye, and is the regular season champion, which, as I will point out, does get you $50 back, but nobody ever remembers who is the regular season champion. Let's see, we did Saquon, we did Gags, we did Yinzer Jags, we did Possum versus the... Okay, last matchup was the only real consequential matchup of this week, because it was 2 teams going head-to-head, playing for a bye week. One of you is going to get it. One of you is going to have to play in week 14. Biscuits versus Disco. And Biscuits holds on, getting a 10-point victory, 203.95 to 193.4 for Disco. So Biscuits, with that, he clinches second place and the first round bye. Disco ends up dropping from third place to fourth place. So with Josh jumping all the way up to 3 there. Biscuits, Tom Brady's 60, almost 68. Claypool, 17.5. C.D. Lamb, 14.5. Van Jefferson, 14.5. Zeke, 9. Aaron Jones, 21.5. Komet, 4.5. A.J. Dillon in the flex, 7. Boswell, only 1 or so, 1 point something. And the Chiefs defense, big factor here too. Yahoo says 31, but they ended up giving up a lot of yards and stuff. So they didn't do too great. I think we bumped you up, looks like 15, I want to say, to about 46. So, well over, about 115-ish from Jim's Buns, Brady, and the Chiefs defense. Said some teens, scores in the teens there, 21 for Aaron Jones. Pushes this matchup too far for Disco to try to catch up. He kind of had a chance on Monday night, but Biscuits had Van Jefferson, while Disco had Ertz and Prater. But I said Ertz got 9, and Prater actually did pretty good. Got you about 17 or 18, actually. But Van Jefferson had a touchdown, almost 15 there, enough to keep the margin here comfortable enough for Biscuits to get the win. So we ran through his team. Disco had Mahomes go for 43, Tyreek 11.5, Godwin 20.5, Metcalf 8.5, Fournette 26, Kamara 27.5, Ertz 9.2, Judy 9.7. Said Prater was about 17.5-ish. And the Chargers defense, Yahoo says 11. I'm going to guess we bumped you up to about 20 on that. But it wasn't quite enough, as Biscuits went over 200. Disco couldn't quite get there. And Biscuits, again, locks up that number 2 seed and a bye week in the first round of the playoffs. While Disco drops to the 4 seed, and he will go up against the Isotopes in the first round of the playoffs. So, Don't think there were any big injuries this week, anything to talk about too much. But yeah, thought the playoff seedings were going to be set. Thought I was going to get to play Possum Magic next week, which would mean, basically, if that had happened, based on the seedings, that if I would have won this week, if I would have been the 3 seed and played Possum Magic this week, and assuming that I would maybe, just for speculation's sake, if I beat Possum Magic this week, if I was the 3 seed, which I am not, that would have meant that I would have gotten to play Biscuits versus Biscuits and Porn on Christmas. So we could have been watching this matchup probably at their house in a. I don't know that we've ever gone head to head in a playoffs there, Jim. But Justin fucked it all up. Could have possibly had a matchup against you next week. He also fucked it up because now if I if I'm able to win, sorry Possum, not trying to pick on you, but I don't think you're going to beat Shawshank this week. So now, if I'm able to beat the Disco this week, if the Topes can beat Disco, that would mean that since I'm the 5 seed, I would have to play Detling next week. Also meaning that there's no chance this year of a Detling Craig Tonto Bowl. So it could have been a possibility. Said if I would have ended up in the 3 seed and would have gotten to play Jim next week, and maybe Detling if he would make it to the Tonto Bowl there. So, but yeah, looks like this week I'm gonna have to get through Disco, and if I do that, then I will have to play Detling for sure next week because most likely Possum Magic goes out this week, and that would leave me, if I win, as the lowest seed, which means basically Disco, you or me, one of us is gonna play Detling. The winner of our matchup is going to get Detling most likely here. So, and unfortunately, Biscuits is probably pissed off too because that means more likely than not he's going to have to play Shawshank next week, and I'm pretty sure that's the team that none of us want to play right now. So yeah, let's take a quick peek at those playoff matchups. Disco, Yahoo projects him to win by currently. Well, I've got Chase Edmonds in there, and he's still projected at 0. So I'm going to guess my projection will bump up to like 180. But Disco is currently like 205. The only silver lining for me is this week is that Disco, you got a lot of tough matchups. You got Mahomes and Hill on a Thursday night game on the road, which I don't like that if I'm you. Thursday night, I mean, this matchup is probably going to swing on what happens Thursday night. Those games tend to be duds. Got my fingers crossed that this game, I mean, it should be a shootout. But as we know, Thursday night games, for some reason, doesn't matter who's playing, those games tend to be kind of offensive duds, which is, again, praying for that. Godwin, New Orleans, that's a tough match. That's a tough defense. Metcalf's at the Rams, assuming Ramsey is back. That's a tough matchup. Jonathan Taylor against New England, that's a tough matchup. Fournette, against the Saints. They have a good run defense. That's a tough matchup. Kamara, Tampa Bay is a tough run defense too. So then Prater and Arizona at Detroit. Those should be pretty good for you. Godwin should be okay. I said Ertz, Prater, and Arizona. All your Cardinals there should be okay. But your big guns, the only positive I've got going for me to spin this week, looking forward up to this matchup, is that you have some difficult ones. So, gonna need some things to swing my way here. Said kind of need Mahomes and Tyreek to be quiet. Metcalf has been quiet anyway. but I need that Patriots defense to step up and shut down Taylor, and maybe the Saints can hold. Man, that's gonna be the Sunday night game is Tampa Bay and New Orleans, so Disco is gonna have a lot riding on that. Um, I think looks like my team will be done by the Sunday night game. So yeah, our matchup will come down to that. Fournette and Kamara. Who know? And depending on what the point difference is, they're going to need those defenses. Two tough run defenses. So hopefully things can pan out the way I hope they will. Otherwise, it's going to be a quick exit for the Topes in the first round here, thanks to probably thanks to Justin knocking me off in this past week here. Going to be if that's what ends up happening, going to be a tough pill to swallow for a little while here. Going out so quickly that way. Don't mind going out in the next round, or just always hate going out in the first round. But I think if it happens, it's going to be set again. Not trying to pick on Possum Magic, but I think we all know that your team is kind of reeling right now. Would have much rather played them this week. So we'll see. All my matchups are actually pretty good, and Discos are bad for the most part, which is about the only good thing I've got going for me this week here. So, and then we've got Shawshank versus Possum Magic. Projection is 195 to 168. Shawshank's got Herbert on Thursday night again. Jamar Chase at Denver, that's a tough matchup. Kupp should be fine. Jefferson, Edwards-Helaire on Thursday. We'll see what happens there. I believe the Chargers cannot defend the run, though, so that could be something good there. Dalvin Cook, not till Monday night, so we'll see if he is necessary to determine the outcome of this matchup by then. So he went off last week. So the only bright spot for Possum Magic, I would say, going into this matchup is that Josh's whole team went off last week, and usually when guys go off, they tend to cool down a little bit, at least a little bit, the week afterwards. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. I doubt Dalvin Cook's going to go off for another 40 points. Divisional game there at the Bears. Andrews against Green Bay could be a little bit tricky, especially if Lamar doesn't play. Well, it's going to be tricky for Mark Andrews to have a good game if Mark Andrews doesn't play. But yeah, I meant to say Lamar. You got Pittman against the Patriots defense. That's kind of tough. You got the Saints defense at Tampa Bay. That could be okay, not so great. Possum's got Russell Wilson at the Rams. That should be okay. Kyler Murray did all right. Diggs versus Carolina. Isn't Carolina where Gilmore is? I wonder if they will put him on Diggs. Traquan at Tampa Bay. You got St. Brown. Chubb versus the Raiders should be okay. Freeman. Gronk against New Orleans. Mixon at Denver. Denver's defense, I mean, they're tougher than they get credit for, so that's going to be interesting to see. So Shawshank has Chase. You got Mixon for Possum there, so that could be a difficult matchup. I'm strongly considering benching T. Higgins this week. I think the Denver defense pretty much clamped down Mahomes and Tyreek when they've played, so that's kind of I gotta wait and see. I'll decide on it later, but might be a situation where I end up not playing T. Higgins this week, so we'll see. Which would be it'd be a tough call because he's been on a roll. And then you got San Francisco defense at home against Atlanta, but you got Koo as your kicker, so your kicker is going against your defense there. So you're probably going to be missing. Well, you've got Damian Harris, the Patriots running back. I don't know if you'll put him in. He's got a hamstring injury. That's tough. Even though they just had a bye week, that might be a tough one to put in there, especially since you never know what the Patriots are going to do with their running backs for sure. But again, Elijah Moore's on IR. Thielen, high ankle sprain. It's going to be, if he plays, I would be surprised. But yeah, you don't have too much else here going on for Possum Magic that you can do, other than hope that Shawshank has a quiet week. Some of your guys can really pop off and do some damage here. But in all honesty, I'm sorry, Tree, but it is not looking good for you based on the past few weeks here. And you're out of moves, can't really do anything. So, hey, both of you guys are ringless, so I'm rooting for both of you in this matchup. I don't care who wins. Said rooting for either one of you to get a win and get closer to your first Tonto Bowl. All right, so that is it. That basically sums up Week 14, heading into 15. Yinzer Jags and Biscuits will be on bye. We're going to have Disco versus the Topes and Shawshank versus Possum. And yeah, I think that's about it. We will be back here. Look forward to what they have to say in the podcast here. They'll only have 2 matchups to talk about. Though I should say that hopefully it's better than last week's podcast, which might have been the worst podcast, you guys, the most lackluster podcast I've ever heard from you guys. Also because you didn't even, there was no acknowledgement of any really of the previous recaps. I think last week's recap went pretty hard on Brian, but no one even had any mention of that. Plus, worst of all, you guys were in the car together, 2 guys in the car together, and you played Wilson Phillips, hold on, and you did not make a Harold and Kumar reference? Come on, guys. Come on. Step up your game, because it's down right now. It's my respect for the podcast has taken a dive recently. Especially said possibly the worst episode you guys have ever done, in my humble opinion. Anyway, get your shit together. Blaming your children being more important. What kind of shit is that? Well, come on, guys. All right. So, 2 matchups this week. All you guys that are gone, can't wait to see you next year and have a good, another great season. Looking forward to seeing what happens in the playoffs here. Who comes out on top? Will Disco get his first ring? Will Shawshank get his first ring? Will Possum Magic finally get his first ring? Or will Biscuits get his second? Will Yinzer Jags get their 4th? Or will the Isotopes get number 7? We will TBD. All right, everybody. Hopefully, I'm very pessimistic right now about this, but hopefully no more big, huge issues with COVID this week. Again, I think it's gonna. I'm not optimistic. Very pessimistic about that, but we will see. Hopefully, everyone's teams this week, all 4 of us, meet or exceed expectations. No injuries, great matchups, 2 nail-biting slugfests, and we will see who comes out on the other side and goes up against Yinzer Jags and Biscuits next week. So, all right, guys, thanks for listening, watching, or whatever it is you do. Sorry for the occasional coughing there. Still just kind of can't quite shake that cough yet. But anyway, is that it? That is it. See you guys next week, and thanks for listening. Bye-bye.